Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Dave Hughes. I'm the Director of Product Management here at Leverage. As you may know, we are the service corporation for the League of Southeastern Credit Unions. And today we're going to learn about artificial intelligence. I have with me three esteemed panelists that are going to field questions. I'll be asking those questions, but please feel free to chime in your chat box with any questions that you might have. We'll get to those probably as we go along. Without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists here. I have a few bios to go through, so bear with me. First off, we have Mr. Nathan Haas. Nathan has been in technology, finance, or fintech for nearly 30 years with roles ranging from customer training and training management to product management to sales and implementations. Most recently, he's been involved with breakthrough technologies like RPA, being robotic process automation, and conversational AI. He's been client-facing through it all, so he understands the human impact of change and knows that quality processes are what allow disruptive technology to actually enable businesses. Next, we have Mr. Clark Duncan. As the Director of Products and Implementation, Clark is adept at implementing digital solutions and a big believer that technology can transform credit unions and their members' lives. With a supporting background in member experience, business development, training, and branch management, Clark is a digital experiences innovator. His Future Leaders in Innovation program, otherwise known as FLIP, earned him a finalist position in the CUE's Next Top Credit Union Executive Program. A CUE's Certified Credit Union Manager, Clark has earned the moniker CU Rockstar from CU Magazine. In fact, Clark's passion for innovation inspired him to speak at a CUNA conference on using innovation to attract and retain millennial members. And finally, we have Mr. Stephen Morse. Stephen has over 2 decades of experience in financial services, fintech, and artificial intelligence in the US and globally. He has frequently worked within early stage transformational financial technology firms servicing banks, credit unions, and other financial institutions. At Zest AI, Stephen is responsible for credit union relationships on the East Coast. Stephen's alma mater is NC State University. He resides in Miami and is a frequent speaker on the subject of fintech and AI. So with that, we will get right into the questions. I hope that you can all see my screen.
I don't see it right now, Dave.
Okay, well, it probably would help if I shared it. There we go. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There we go, Dave.
There we go.
Great. Gotta love technology. Okay. And as I was reading those bios, I should have had this screen up. Pardon me. As you can see, Nathan is with Active AI, Clark is with CU Next Gen, and Stephen is with Zest AI. So the beginning of this webinar will be questions in general for the panel. Then we will get into more questions that pertain to the technologies of their respective products. So this is first question I'm going to ask of Clark. What is AI and how does it work?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of what brings us all here today is the conversation around AI, artificial intelligence. So I think just to kind of kick us off, we'll just kind of break it down into its simplest terms of, if we're looking at what AI is, it's the ability for technology to basically critically think kind of with a human-like mind, right? So we're taking a technology and trying to mimic human interactions and human interfaces to be able to problem solve and do some data-driven thinking. So when we're thinking of AI, we're thinking about data. Data is going to be kind of a big topic that you're going to hear a lot about today. Basically works by having computers, machines, systems process information through software to mimic that human cognitive activity. So it's basically taking the ability to perform human-like tasks that you wouldn't typically think of technology in certain ways, like perception, reasoning, learning, decision-making. And that's kind of what the base and core of AI is as far as how does it work. Kind of like I said, it takes a lot of data. So it starts off by collecting data, data processing, selecting the features that you want as part of the AI engineering, goes into model training, model evaluation, and testing to really getting to the deployment of what is that specific AI. And like I said, it all comes down to data. The more data that is available, the better the quality is going to be. So when you're really taking it to the simplest terms, at the end of the day, AI takes unstructured data in a specific way and gives it structure to perform certain tasks or abilities. It kind of learns patterns and relationships with that data to be able to make decisions.
Okay, thank you, Clark. Our next question is directed towards Nathan. What are machine and deep learning, and how do they relate to AI?
So this is you could actually have a day long or even a 2 or 3 day long class on this. It could be, you can get pretty deep on this, but basically machine learning is teaching a machine to do AI. So you're teaching it to, your machine learning is taking a system or a process or a batch of data and teaching the system to be able to do something with it. And that's really oversimplified. A good example is Watson chess from, if you remember, anybody remembers the Watson IBM beating the champions. That was essentially machine learning. It's not deep learning because it's staying on a single level and not going any further, but it is if this, then that at a fairly complex level. Alexa is a good example of machine learning that a lot of us have in our home. It's obviously fallible. Netflix and Amazon, those are not machine learning, those are algorithms still. People who liked this also bought or watched. And so that's more of an algorithm. So hopefully that's starting to create some differentiation there. Deep learning is then going a whole nother, don't look up deep learning in Wikipedia, because it's going to just, there's a lot of big words. And as bankers, I don't think that's something that it's in a whole different world. So to simplify that, it's basically deep learning is going several layers past that of what is a picture of a dog, or what is this picture of? That's a picture of a dog. What is a dog is the deep learning piece. And so that at that point, you're into something entirely different. If you think about it, if you ask a 2-year-old, what's this a picture of? They'll go, a dog. What's a dog? And they'll be like, it's fuzzy. Right? I mean, but there's so much more to it than that. And that is where deep learning becomes much more deep. So one of the key places I think that people are, the mainstream uses of a deep learning system is self-driving cars. So that's not, it goes way beyond just an if, then this. The system has the ability to actually take a look at what's going on around it and make an evaluation on what that means. So it is generally unsupervised also. So you have to create boundaries that allow it to not become its own bad actor. And I think I'll stop there because I keep going, but we'll stop there for now.
Thanks for cutting that short from your 2 days. I appreciate that. Our next question is for Stephen. What are some common misunderstandings about AI?
Yeah, well, this is an interesting one. And I think similar to Nathan's question, we could talk for hours and hours about many common misunderstandings about AI. But I'm choosing to focus on 2. And one is, I think that AI is mystical and magical and black box is sort of a common sort of misunderstanding. And I'll address that in a second. And then a second one I want to talk about is companies and credit unions, the misperception, the misunderstanding that companies and credit unions need to have large amounts of technology or data science resource to benefit from AI. So let's take the first one, mystical, magical, and black box. And although AI is still relatively new in the credit union space, been coming at us now for the last sort of 2 or 3 years, but gaining a lot of momentum. And so it feels a little bit foreign in the credit union industry. That's not the case in our consumer lives, of course. AI is all around us. It's ubiquitous. All of us are using it every day, many times a day. And functioning with it in a very natural and harmonious way. And so examples of this, of course, are on our smartphone all the time, whether it's Google Maps when we're driving, Netflix or Amazon recommendations. My daughter loves chatting away to Amazon Alexa. And then I think about the power of Uber and Lyft and the amazing apps that they are, that because they're all powered by AI. And we're all interacting with them without even thinking about it, that AI is powering all of these things. And so to piggyback off of, I think, what the guys were saying earlier, really at the heart of AI, it's simply processing massive amounts of data to perform specific tasks. And in our case at Zest, the AI is trained specifically around underwriting, around predicting the likelihood of default. And it's simply a far better prediction of borrower risk. And then onto the issue of black box then. Well, there are some AIs do seem black box, but that's not always the case. OpenAI, as the name suggests, aims to be very transparent on the inner workings of its AI. Twitter now is exposing its algorithms. And certainly at Zest AI, we're highly transparent in everything that we do. Credit unions know exactly the components of the models that we roll out, which is somewhat ironic because FICO, which is really sort of, I suppose, who we're competing against, is a black box. No one knows exactly the inputs of FICO. And then I think to the second one then, that companies and credit unions need to have large technology or data science resources to benefit from AI. But that's simply not the case. There are a good number of fintechs who are delivering great solutions to credit unions. And really, this is the power of cloud computing and SaaS that enables fintechs, B2B fintechs, to bring great solutions to enable credit unions to benefit from the power of AI in many different ways. I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Now we are back to Nathan. What is ChatGPT and what's the big deal?
So ChatGPT is it's an output of OpenAI. So you could say a product. They've actually just started monetizing it, so it is now a product officially. But just so everybody knows, I've gotten this a few times. What does GPT stand for? Functionally, in our world, nothing. It stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So that doesn't mean anything to any of us here, I suspect, but now you know. It is basically ChatGPT is really smart at answering questions based on the information that's been given. So that could be anything from everything on Wikipedia and beyond to just everything on your website. So you get to set up the boundaries that it uses, which will come in handy as we talk about this, I think, is understanding the boundaries. It does have some shortcomings. It's terrible at math and can be somewhat, it can give completely flat wrong answers sometimes if you give it a really big sample set. From our experience inside the credit union space, it has been extremely reliable and it's really, really smart. It has the ability to look at all the data that your service reps look at. And I think that'll come in handy as we talk further too, because that it basically gives it the power of one of your member services representatives with limitations. I think I'll pause there as well.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. Clark, I promise we're going to get back to you, but we are going to Stephen next again. Will AI regulation be needed? If so, why?
I think the answer is yes. And let me start by saying I'm personally of the view generally in life that less regulation is better than more regulation. That said, there's obviously been a lot of conversation around this, in particular around ChatGPT lately. And I think it's inevitable, right, that sensible regulation will be needed across AI, the AI industry generally, and also across specific industries where AI is being leveraged, which of course will be all industries. But by example, back on ChatGPT, Scientific America asked ChatGPT if it should be regulated. I could have done the same, but Scientific America did it for me. And I wanted to read an excerpt of a response from ChatGPT, and it said, "This level of sophistication, ChatGPT, raises concerns about the potential for ChatGPT to be used for nefarious purposes, such as impersonating individuals or spreading misinformation. Given these concerns, it's important that ChatGPT be subject to some form of regulation. This could take the form of requiring companies or individuals using the technology to clearly disclose that they're chatting using ChatGPT, or put in place safeguards to prevent the technology to be used for nefarious purposes," which I thought was pretty interesting to hear from ChatGPT itself. In another example, I think self-driving vehicles is another sort of really interesting case, where it brings new challenges around insurance, right? In the event of a crash, who's at fault, the driver or the AI, the car, which is very interesting and clearly will be need to thought about in a different way than today. And in finance and credit unions, of course, we're already heavily regulated. And we're seeing regulators lean in already around the use of AI. We've seen the CFPB as well as the NCUA speaking about fairness in lending. The CFPB has been leaning in on bias in lending, the black box nature of AI and need for transparency, which I think is important. And indeed, Zest AI has been encouraging this communication from the regulators. And indeed, we've solved for a lot of these issues, all of these issues as relates to our industry, and indeed have a lot of technology, more than 30 patents around solving for these issues around fairness, around delivering accurate adverse action reasons in AI as relates to our industry. We've been called the gold standard for machine learning and credit underwriting, and we're frequently out in front of the regulators, the CFPB, the NCUA, really talking about the safe, fair, transparent, and compliant use of AI in our industry.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Clark, why and where do credit unions need AI, and how do they benefit from it?
Absolutely. And I actually love this question. So, prior to being on the QSO side, my entire career was working at a credit union and working with the members in different capacities, from working at the branch and being a branch manager to working on member experience all the way through to digital experience. And I think it kind of all ties together. And I think it's why we're all here and why we all do what we do. And that is to make the member experience as great as it possibly can. And I think it's pretty easy to see that the way that we interact with our members and the way that we do transactions and the way that members have access to their accounts and the way that they utilize their accounts and do different things, it's shifting and it's evolving every day. But a lot of that is less face-to-face human interaction. So when we're looking at AI and we're looking at why credit unions need it and how can they benefit from it, I think it all ties back in some capacity to the member experience. I think it helps meet the needs of the member in a lot of different ways with the ways that they interact, making it be a lot less frictionless on the member side, while also not increasing the fraud risk on our side. So I think a lot of it comes down to mitigating some of that risk. AI can be used in some of the riskiest situations that we can face, especially when we're looking at fraud, especially when we're looking at digital banking and people trying to interact with digital banking and get access to things they shouldn't. So I think it allows us, the members, to have access to their information to create the ease of banking, make banking easier, make it smarter, make it more efficient, and creating that best experience possible without adding some of that burden from some of the risk on the credit union side. So I think a good example of this, when we're looking at AI and we're looking at different pieces of information, if we're looking at voice and face biometrics, if we're looking at liveness detection, using AI to determine the intent of the person. So using some of that data and using login history and all of these different things to try to understand that pattern of behaviors for those members. I think as that continues to increase, to enhance with the way that members are accessing their accounts, the need for AI and the way that it's used day to day by the credit union and obviously the end result to the member is going to continue to evolve and shift in that direction. So I think that's where credit unions need it the most, but also where they can benefit from it, and in the end, creating a benefit for the member side as well.
Okay, thank you, Clark. We're back to Nathan. Is AI secure? Can it jeopardize member data or facilitate bad actors?
This is one, the really short answer is it depends. In most cases, I can't imagine any vendor, any company offering you a product or a service or a system that would jeopardize that you can answer those questions to no. I know everybody in this group, and I have to imagine anybody out there is going to say, no, it cannot jeopardize the data. It cannot facilitate bad actors in this implementation. You heard Stephen talk about regulations. I think that's really, really important. I agree with that. There's big talk out there right now about hitting an AI pause. I think that's a terrible idea. I think we have to move forward because this is a competitive environment. But I think regulation is really important, and some due diligence on the part of credit unions leadership is, I think, very valid. We've been tasked with documenting exactly in our chatbots, if a customer enters or member enters a particular piece of information, where does it go? How does it get obfuscated? How is it protected? What continent does it land on? Where does it come back through? What servers does it touch? Who has access to it? All of that is out there. We have that. We have it documented. I'm sure everybody here does as well. And so I think that's important that you, as a consumer, make sure you understand that piece of it. So that's my recommendation. It really can't jeopardize or facilitate bad actors in the current implementations is the really short answer, but do due diligence anyhow.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. So now we move on to our next segment where we're going to talk to each of the gentlemen about a little more specific to their products, some of the questions. So again, we are back to Nathan. Where would I collect data to train the AI, and where can I apply the information the AI gathers?
And that's another, it depends on what you want the data to do and what you want it for. I can speak specifically to our world, and that is chatbots and live chat and that sort of thing. In general, when we train a chatbot, it's on the data available to members. And so it kind of depends on how far down you want to go. We can train on the website. You can train on any knowledge bases you have, any documentation that you have. And so it can really be used to, in this instance, it can be used to answer or to take care of the customer based on the data that you already have collected. So if you have a really good, robust website that has all sorts of member information that none of your members ever go to, we can still train on that and make that information available by them just asking a question. And it's very, very good at finding that information and for lack of a better phrase, regurgitating it back in a very clean way. There are long and short answer responses available. But it just depends on what you want it to do. So even all the way down to the knowledge base, most of the customers we have that have a knowledge base are also including that in what they train their AI on. You want to keep those boundaries narrow because we've done experiments with it where we trained it on the website, but given it some breadth, and it goes and pulls information because of the acronyms used, it'll start pulling the wrong acronyms. So we've learned to make sure that the guardrails are fairly close in and contain a very tight space for the credit union.
Okay, next question, and I have to interject. We're running a little bit behind schedule, so just want to.
I'll speed up.
Okay. What if I want the AI to behave in a specific way or have a response that is different from what it determines?
So you can, at least in our world, we've blended a bespoke Q&A FAQ catalog that then you can blend with ChatGPT. So you would have it respond the way you want it to. And if the system can't find the response to the question that's being asked, then it will go out and use ChatGPT to comb the data that's already out there and respond with a more generic answer. So it's a blended response thing. And that is, I think that's probably out there in most offerings at this point, where the supplier, the vendor, the company that you're working with responds in a specific way. And then if it can't figure that out, then it falls back to something more generic.
How can one leverage ChatGPT for member services?
And I think we've already answered this question pretty well. You just take the data that's out there, use it as basically a front line for your member services team, answer questions, explain documentation. If you feed it documentation like loan apps or the terms and conditions, you can actually have it trained on that and then be able to answer questions off of that about the information that's in there. Because if you read the terms and conditions, it's a lot of jumbled data, jumbled information for a general consumer. And so you can ask questions around that, and ChatGPT will give a simplified answer back. So all those things are possible, and that's how that can work out for you.
And finally, for Nathan, if AI learned in English, can it respond to other languages?
The short answer here is yes. We've deployed in Spanish. We have bilingual chatbots and responses available, but we use a translation layer. But the system also allows you to enter a native Spanish question with native Spanish responses. And so, yes, it can learn in any language pretty much. If with the translation services that are out there now, you can plug in English and get a 90% or 95% accurate response in any language. So as far as ChatGPT, it's only English right now, and the next language is Icelandic. So it's not going to be native, but it can be a translation layer that will work in any language you need.
Okay, thank you, Nathan. We're next going to move on to questions for Clark. What is robotic process automation, and how does AI influence it?
Yeah, so even going back to, I think the very first question you asked me about, what is AI? I think we can kind of take RPA down to the simplest form as well. So when we're talking RPA, we're talking about that robotic process automation. And RPA is a software that basically allows you to create automated workflows to work on clearly defined processes and tasks. So RPA will makes it easy to build and deploy basically a digital workforce into your systems. Especially working at credit unions, we know that there's a lot of processes that are defined. They're by the book. They're specific keystrokes. They're specific processes. They are rule based, and that is what RPA is able to do. And so that's kind of how it differentiates from AI as well, but also how AI can influence that as well. So bots are able to create processes and do these tasks much faster, more efficiently than people can, but it is extremely rule based. It's, hey, here is exactly what the bot is defined to do. Here's the process. Here's the workflow. Here's how it can interact with your systems. Where AI can influence it by allowing it to kind of be the brains behind those processes. So RPA is kind of the hands that are doing the work, and AI is kind of that brains that can kind of have that human centric approach in a lot of different ways to help define what some of those rules are, to help it to learn, to grow, kind of overcome some of the limitations of RPA with the strength and weaknesses that it does have. But when they work in tandem together, you're kind of creating that powerhouse of a solution that can help credit unions in a lot of ways with what we talked about earlier, just about helping with that member experience and making it the best possible experience possible. And when we're talking RPA as well, we're also talking about the employee experience, making that better and more efficient as well.
Okay. Do you see AI replacing or complementing an RPA solution?
I definitely can see it complementing an RPA solution. So I think that's one of the best parts about RPA. And when I'm talking about RPA specifically, with our at CNXtion, it's called RPA Genie. It's one of our proprietary platforms that we use for RPA. And they're able to work together to automate a lot of those complex tasks that may not always be process or rule driven. I think an example of this is if we look at like Skip a Pay, for example. So if you're within digital banking and you're interacting with an AI chatbot, for example, and you're having that conversation and you say, hey, I'm interested in doing a Skip a Pay. I think a lot of our members are used to doing something along those lines. It's a service that we provide to our members in a lot of ways, or at least most credit unions do. The chatbot is driving that conversation. It's asking the right questions. It's interacting with the member, trying to take what might kind of be some of that undefined data. So maybe the words Skip a Pay weren't used and it was interacting in a different way. But RPA is the one that's actually going to complete that transaction in some way. So if it's a Skip a Pay, for example, it can go in and actually complete the form. It can do those keystrokes, it can do those tasks and kind of have the digital workforce on the back end where AI has really helped leading some of that conversation as well. I think another quick example is like an intent-based site navigation. If you're talking to your chatbot and you start asking questions about mortgages, how it can drive you directly to the mortgage screen within digital banking. So I think those are just kind of different examples about how they can interact and work together, and AI is helping it learn from itself. But they're also meant to do different things. An automated car isn't going to replace a jet ski, for example. They're both going to get you from point A to point B. They're both going to have their own different roles. They're going to have their own structures, but I think they complement each other more than actually replace.
Okay.
Trying to keep my answers quick and concise as well, so I don't take us too far over time.
You know what? We're actually back on schedule. So.
Okay, perfect.
What value do AI and RPA bring to a credit union?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with kind of looking at it from a digital workforce. I think kind of what I always talk about, and something that that I have the opportunity to do a lot is do like RPA workshops, where we actually get to go to credit unions and talk through kind of some of their pain points and where do they see some issues. And I think it's kind of the blessing and the curse of credit unions in a lot of ways. Of we have the capabilities to work with a bunch of different vendors to accomplish the goals that we need. I think the problem we run into sometimes is those different systems don't always communicate well with each other. So I think a good example of that is like fraud. So if we're looking at a fraud dispute, you might have one that's your card vendor, you might have your core, you have all of these different systems that don't communicate well with each other, and they just don't interact. RPA has the ability to kind of connect some of those outdated systems that don't communicate with each other, and complete a process. So if we're looking at a member puts in a fraud dispute, that might mean that a person has to go in and review that and then go to the core and check the account and then log into the card system and get that card canceled, and then potentially even log in somewhere else and get a new card ordered, while also validating that the address is correct in the core, and just making sure that all that information is there in the right place. And it might take an employee 3 or 4 different logins to get to the end result, where RPA would have the ability to go in and complete some of those workflows and complete some of those processes. And what I always say in those workshops is, let humans do what humans do best, and let bots do what they do. Let them do those keystrokes. Let them do some of that heavy lifting, while allowing your human workers to work with your members and give that best experience possible, and not being bogged down by some of those just more manual tasks.
Okay, thank you, Clark. We're next going to move on to Stephen. So what is AI automated underwriting?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Well, as we are gathering, there are obviously lots of flavors of AI, even within the credit union industry. And so what we do is very specific and relates to underwriting, obviously. And as it sounds, it's enabling credit unions really to automate and transform lending with AI-powered underwriting. And if the solution is challenging anyone or anything, as lots of sort of fintechs are challenging some sort of incumbent methodology, it's existing methods for underwriting that are underpinned by FICO or Vantage. And as we know, FICO has really not evolved much in 40 years or so. And we find when we speak to credit unions that it's a pretty blunt instrument, and lending organizations end up duct taping rules and policy on top of FICO in order to try to make accurate credit underwriting decisions. So what we do is we build bespoke credit underwriting models using a lot more data, hundreds of data points. We talked about that earlier, about using a lot of data versus a dozen or so that are used in FICO today. And we find when you use a lot more data and better math, and the better math is the AI, it's machine learning in our case, you have a far better understanding of borrower risk, a far better prediction of borrower risk. And when you have a far better understanding, a far better prediction of borrower risk, you can significantly increase auto decisioning with confidence, and you can transform your lending in many other ways.
How does AI automated underwriting benefit credit unions?
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those other ways then. Again, really enabling credit unions to automate and transform. How transform? Well, we think about it in 3 different ways. One is smarter lending, the second is more inclusive lending, and the third is more efficient lending. And so smarter lending, again, when you have higher confidence in borrower risk, you can achieve many things. You can safely expand credit to more, you can lend deeper and increase yield, or alternatively, you can reduce risk. And we're hearing more about that in the economic environment that we're sort of facing now. You can lend smarter. The second pillar there is more inclusive lending. So one of the amazing things about the way in which we apply this technology is we find we can deliver results that are not just more profitable for the credit union, but fairer results too for members, and specifically around protected classes and the underserved, by safely increasing approvals for more of those that are most in need. And this is a really big deal for Zest. Our mission has long been to make fair and transparent credit available to all. And in many ways, I think this is why we have such a good relationship and such good traction in the credit union industry, obviously very much aligned with that mission. And then the third, again, is around efficiency. This is more automated decisioning. We've seen credit unions increase auto decisioning from 0 or 5 or 10 or 25%. It doesn't matter where, talk about your starting point, but have moved up to 70, 80% plus auto decisioning. So huge impact on operational efficiency, a huge impact on faster response time and response time to borrowers off hours. We see increases in booking rates because of faster response times. And all of this, of course, is a knock-on effect on improved member experience.
AI automated underwriting can be costly. Is there an alternative for smaller credit unions?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'd say that it's not necessarily costly when I think you evaluate the very large benefits and ROI that can be driven by AI-powered underwriting. And so we frequently see direct financial impact of many millions of dollars for the credit union and ROIs of 10x or much, much more. That said, the question is fair. Zest did start out serving some of the largest credit unions in the country. And indeed, we work with 4 of the top 5 in Florida and 5 of the top 6 in Alabama, by example. So Suncoast, Five Star, Redstone, All-In are all partners of ours. But the good news is we have been expanding to smaller credit unions, and indeed released recently, we just announced a solution for smaller credit unions called Zest Select that enables much smaller credit unions in the hundreds of millions, couple of hundred million, 100 million, to benefit in the same way that larger credit unions are.
And finally, who at the credit union should evaluate AI automated underwriting technology?
Yeah, well, as you can probably gather, clearly it's typically the CLO or the SVP lending, pick your title, VP consumer lending, who are the primary people involved in the decision. Although there is overarching impact across the organization. And so we frequently find that IT folks are brought into the conversation and others, right? There's a real direct impact on member experience. But I would say it tends to be led by the lending organization.
And now we have the big question that I'm certainly interested in hearing about, and many of our audience members, I'm sure, are as well. Will AI disrupt the job market? And if so, how might it for credit unions? And if you each want to take a pass at this, you're more than welcome to. I think we're pretty good on schedule.
So I'll jump in if nobody else wants to yet. From what we're seeing, AI, the job market is actually kind of driving AI in this instance, because every credit union that I speak with, they're trying to control the costs of service, and humans are getting more expensive. For some reason, I don't fully understand why, but it's getting harder to hire good people at an affordable rate. And so it's not like people are going to be losing their jobs, but what they're trying to do is keep the people they have and apply them to more valuable tasks, which is where AI comes in. And I bet Clark will say something similar as well. And that we're basically just trying to augment the people that you already have so that they can do more valuable stuff. And so that's kind of the short answer that I would say is, will it disrupt the individuals at your credit union? No. Will they be able to do more cooler stuff and the easy stuff go to machines? That's where I see it going.
And Nathan, you are right. That is almost exactly what I would say. But yeah, I agree completely. I think disrupting the job market, I think when you're talking about disruption, I think you're talking about changes. I think, yeah, you're absolutely going to see some changes similar to what Nathan said about just kind of augmenting the people that you already have. I think it'll have a similar impact as the last 3 industrial revolutions, where new jobs will be created, and some of the jobs that are already there will be just more efficient. I think there's some inefficient jobs that can be replaced by some of these things, allowing for better opportunities for the employees that you already have to have access to some of that knowledge and just create and enhance better opportunities for them, and at the same time growing some of the technologies that your credit union has. I think when we're looking at AI, though, I think one thing to kind of keep in mind is there's not like a one size fits all model. Like every credit union is going to kind of have to have the right strategic goals and right strategic partner to really accomplish what they're looking to do in their day-to-day operations. So I think in that way, I think when you're looking at disruption, you're really looking at some of those changes, and I definitely think you'll see some impact there. But agree 1,000% with Nathan of what that will do to current jobs, and really understanding how to leverage all of those tools that are available to your workers and your workforce.
Yeah, and sorry to agree with the consensus, but I 100% agree with what Nathan and Clark said, which is undoubtedly, yes, there will be changes in the job market. We certainly see it in the things that we're doing as we bring more automation to lending and underwriting. But we find that credit unions are repurposing folks to higher value tasks, right? Spending more time with members and with loans that are really hard to underwrite, those final few that really do need human eyes on them, or repurposing to higher value tasks out in other parts of the credit union. And, I think about this a lot, right? There's a lot of discussion at the moment about, will this impact, jobs generally? And again, I think to double down on what Clark is saying there, we've seen this over and over again with innovation. Everyone gets scared about the innovation and what it will do to the job market generally. But here I am in a job that didn't exist 5 or 6 years ago. And as I was thinking about and planning for this question in particular, I happened by the ATM at my local credit union. And I'm sure for all of you that remember that, as the ATMs were rolled out, we were all terribly concerned at the impact of jobs at credit unions, but still plenty of jobs to be had, even though we have ATMs. And one final way, and again, Clark mentioned it a little bit there, I like to think about this in sort of big forms of innovation coming at us. I heard a VC talking once about a few years ago about AI and comparing to electricity. Which is that sort of AI, even we use AI in our name now, the company name is Zest AI, and we've got Active AI, and you hear this all the time. But in a few years, AI will just be in everything. It'll just be ubiquitous. It'll be everywhere. In the same way that electricity is, electricity in the 1950s, you used to have an electric oven, an electric iron, and an electric toaster. You don't use the word electric now. It powers everything. And just think about the disruption that electricity could have caused and did cause to a lot of manual jobs. And yet many new jobs were created because of electricity. And I think the same will be true of AI as well, generally across all industries, and certainly very specifically to credit unions.
Yeah, and I know I tied AI and RPA together in a lot of ways. And I know you guys obviously have experience in both of those. Nathan, I know you did a lot of work in RPA and have a lot of background in that as well. But I think even when you hear people talk about kind of like the AI takeover, is it going to disrupt the job market? Should people be scared that it's going to take over or replace their jobs? I think if you were to speak to a lot of employees at credit unions who have really utilized AI and RPA in different ways, they're excited because it's usually taken over some of the jobs that are those most manual, things that are just a lot of steps. It's very repeatable. It's more mundane. And you're really enhancing their experience as an employee to say, oh, great, I don't have to do that one task that took me, 10 hours a week because I just had to sit there and I pull something from here and I move it over here. And, it's replacing a lot of those manual, more mundane tasks and allow people to do kind of what they do best. And that's innovation, that's creativity, that's thinking of ways that they can better enhance the work that they do. So even if it is replacing some of those tasks and some of those jobs, it's usually those things that are a little bit more mundane and not quite as really creating that awesome employee experience that we all want just as bad as the member experience. So just kind of wanted to add that little piece as well.
And I'll add one last little bit too. It takes away distraction so that the human can be more human and in their human interaction. So they're not having to interact with the system as much, and other than the system is just giving them information or taking care of a task while they have a human interaction. So it just makes for better for the folks at the credit union and your members.
Okay, gentlemen. So I mentioned we would answer questions throughout. Because of time, I wanted to let the questions come out. But we have a little bit of time here to address some chat box questions. And let's see here, what do I have? So besides bad actors, what other concerns should I be aware of around GPT? Does anybody want to field that?
I'll go ahead and jump in. That was kind of my my wheelhouse there. Generally speaking, where the data goes, you want to make sure you have that documented, and how it's used. So the big question that I keep getting is customer data safety and security. And so we have documented exactly where it goes, what touches it. Most of what we gather, most of the customer data that we gather, we obfuscate. If it's a digit, we don't store it at all until they start interacting with your core banking system, at which point we're just a go-between. We don't capture any of that data, and no digit. So that's the first safe piece that we do, and that's right up front. But I think bad actors is a really, really limited application if you keep the guardrails close. So that's kind of the key, is how is GPT used? Where are the guardrails and where does the data go?
Okay, another question here from the audience. Where would I collect the data to train the AI, and where can I apply the information that the AI gathers? Anybody want to handle that?
I saw Nathan and I both went off mute. I think there's a couple different answers. Nathan, you're welcome to take it if you'd like.
No, go ahead.
I think when we're talking about like training it, obviously from the credit union perspective, we want to make sure that we're getting as accurate information as possible, right? You know, you hear kind of these horror stories from, you know, ChatGPT and some of these newer ones when they're first rolling out, of just not necessarily giving accurate information. We don't want that to happen, especially if we're talking about rates, if we're talking about some of our processes, some of our standard operating procedures. We want to make sure that all of those things are rule-based and it's coming from a specific knowledge base. So that is some of the training that is there for the AIs. It can pull that information directly from an FAQ type document. It can pull that specifically from the information that you're providing to your credit union. So if you're saying, hey, what are car rates right now? And if you're asking that question, it's pulling from it's as low as, and you know, anytime we're putting that stuff on the website, we're making sure it's got that asterisk. You know, we can make sure that those are the responses that are given from in those certain circumstances. It's coming from those specific pieces, so that we make sure that it's accurate and it's the information we want to share with our members. But Nathan, I'll definitely let you add some more of your expertise there.
No, that was exactly right. And the key piece is how frequently is the data, what data are you using? And generally we limit it to specific to the credit union. So only your website, only your documentation, your knowledge base. So it's not looking anywhere else. It's not going to find data somewhere else and throw that in. And then the other piece is how frequently is it updated? We update every 24 hours. I would be surprised if anybody does it less frequently than that. And because things change. So if you changed your website, the AI will reflect that.
And in the case of, I think the question was in the context of ChatGPT, but in any event, in the case of AI underwriting, we primarily leverage bureau data, and we like that data a lot because it's available already in-house, already paid for, available at time of application. It's FCRA compliant. We know we can generate good, sensible adverse action reasons off of it. And it's very powerful. It delivers very, very powerful results when you use a lot more of it. So I just added that. I'm not sure what the context of the question was, so I hope that helps.
And another question here, and I apologize if some of these are redundant, but I'm just asking them as they come. But what makes one AI better than another AI?
That is a much bigger question than I think that you realize. I mean, it comes down to the, you know, what makes one car better than another car? What makes Coke better than Pepsi? It is very nuanced, very technical. ChatGPT is the generally available benchmark. There are other ones out there that are actually much more powerful based on much larger data sets. But it's the one that's the good balance. And so that's the one that everybody is using for right now, at least. And in that world, and the AI comes down to, in the GPT world, that's what I'm referring to, conversational. In other AIs, it's really, it's down to how the system was written. And I think there are Clark and Stephen could easily answer that question as well.
Yeah, I think I'd answer the question a little bit differently, actually. I think it's how the AI is being leveraged and for what purpose. And as you can gather from this conversation, there are many, many uses of AI. We've just talked about a few, but there are many, many uses of it. And so it's how is the AI being leveraged? What's its business purpose? What are you trying to achieve? And then who is the company that's powering that? And ultimately, when we work with credit unions, although we talk about our technology a lot, and we've got more than 30 patents and are very proud of that, and it delivers very powerful results. There are probably 2 or 3 key things that really matter aside from the power of the model. One is, can we be sure that this is compliant? That is key. So that's partly to do with the AI, but more it's about, regulation and how it's being applied. And then the second one, I think, for credit unions is, how are you going to help me use this? And that's a really big one for us, is like, what's your service like? How do you help me understand this? How do you help me apply it? How do you help me get business value from it? And so we have a very large and experienced customer success team that are there helping you contextualize this and understand this, not just at point of production, but ongoing. So I think I'd answer that in that way, rather than what is smarter than the other.
And I'd have to agree with both of you in different ways. Stephen, I definitely like how you use the word. It depends on how you leverage it. I think it was pretty clever with since we're here with leverage. But yeah, I definitely think it comes down to exactly what you were saying as well, Nathan. Like, what makes Coke better than Pepsi? What makes one better than the other? And it just comes down to what's the best fit for the credit union, what's the best fit for what your goals are, how you're wanting to utilize it, and just kind of going from there. So I think you both did a great job covering that. I don't have a whole lot to add.
Real quick, I think it's also important to recognize that there isn't one AI. It is a whole bunch of columns of systems trained to do something specific. ChatGPT is designed to have conversation. It's not designed to do math. You give it simple math problems, it will get them wrong. So it really comes down to, I think Stephen really nailed it on what are you trying to accomplish and finding the right system for that to create that solution.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. What do credit unions need to look for in a technology partner?
Yeah, I think we can all definitely tackle this one in our own way here, is making sure that it's the right fit, right? Making sure that your business goals are aligning, that your vision's aligning, that your mission's aligning, that if what you're trying to accomplish, that you make sure that you find the partner who is ready to tackle that head on with you, and not only provide your members with the best experience. I know I keep talking about experience. That's kind of my whole career path from the credit union side and now the QSO side is making sure that you have the best experience possible for your members, but also the best experience for you. You want to make sure that your partner that you're working with day in and day out is there to help you achieve your goals, to make sure that they're down in the trenches when you're trying to build something and get something accomplished. I know that we all can speak to that in different ways, where, especially when we're in this technology space, we've had credit unions come to us and say, hey, here's what we want to do. And that one example of that is, hey, we want a microloan, an automated microloan that we have available 24/7 that our members can access and have money funded in their accounts within just a few minutes. Great, let's make it happen. Can your partner work with you and achieve the goals that you want to achieve? Which I know that's all of our goals on this panel is to work with credit unions and make sure that we're providing the best possible product and experience that we can.
Anybody else want to for that?
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of things that were said there. I think it's choosing a partner that has experience and has done this many times before. We're a QSO. We work with more than 120 credit unions. We've done this many times before, have nearly 200 models in production. And so helping you understand this, right? AI shouldn't be foreign or weird or strange, but we recognize it is different. This is a new way of thinking, a new way of underwriting. And so you want someone there who's got experience, who can help you through it. Again, not just as you roll out in production, but thereafter. I think that's probably the most important thing that I would lean to.
Everything that these other gentlemen said, it's basically just willing to work with you and listen. And I don't think most credit unions would tolerate a partner who doesn't listen well. So, and I imagine everybody here would fully agree with that and really try as hard to make sure that they understand what is unique to credit unions in this space, and that listen to what you actually want, and then actually understand what you're actually asking. So sometimes I think we all ask one thing, but we really want something else, and that somebody who's willing to have that conversation. So I'll add to that.
And we do have one last question, and I asked that maybe just one of you tackle it in the interest of time. It is training required for AI? How do you train it? Who wants that one? Nathan, I can see you smiling.
Training is required, and it depends is the short answer. So how you train it is dependent upon the task that you desire and the system that you're looking at. But that's one of those conversations we just talked about that you'll need to have with whoever you're working with.
Okay, thank you, everybody. As you can see on your screen, for more information, you can go to the Leverage website or email consult@myleverage.com. And I'm trying to advance my slide and it's not letting me. How about we try that? There we go. Just wanted to give you a heads up on the next Learning with Leverage webinar in the series. It'll be on May 9th, same time, 11 o'clock Eastern. We'll have GMFA with us to talk about overdraft services, risks, requirements, and best practices. We hope that you can all join us. You should have received an invite. If not, you can go and register there, the link shown at the bottom, or shoot me an email to consult@myleverage.com. And I'd like to thank you for attending, and our panelists, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. You can see the gentlemen who they're with. They are all preferred partners of Leverage. So if you'd like to get a hold of them, we ask that you contact us at consult@myleverage.com, and we can put you in touch with any of these companies. So again, thank you so very much, and I wish you a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody.